Hello everyone, and welcome to video number 17. Today we're going to continue our look into the Romantic movement throughout Europe, and we're going to look specifically at one of the most prolific writers in Germany during that time, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. To begin our discussion for today, then, we need to really understand why, out of all of the potential authors we could have chosen from, why are we choosing to focus on Goethe? And one of the main things we need to realize is that of the three countries we've already discussed, Germany, France, and England, Germany emerges first and foremost as the powerhouse of the Romantic movement, in large part due to the writing of literary figures like Goethe. So to begin with his background then, Goethe is born in Germany in an area called Frankfurt am Main, and he is born in 1749 and lives until 1832. And as we said, he is one of the leading characters or literary figures in Romanticism within Germany. Not only is he a well-known poet, but he is also a playwright, meaning that, like Shakespeare, he writes plays or dramas, but he is also a novelist. And the text that he is perhaps most famous for by far is his play, Faust. And this is what we'll be studying in our look at Romanticism in Germany. So turning then to more details about who Goethe was in life and how he becomes this literary giant within not only Germany, but even now within the world. So he is responsible for inspiring both literary movements within Germany, but also the novel form that takes place as well. In his very first novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther, in 1774, really helps to initiate and begin that Sturm und Drang movement that we talked about in our last video. So you remember that in his novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther, Goethe creates what becomes known as the romantic hero, because his main character, Werther, he comes from this family where he's expected to be and do certain things, specifically to become a lawyer. And that's not at all what this young man wants. He's more of this dark and brooding character who is very in touch with his emotions and is, in a sense, a bit rebellious. And this becomes the archetype, then, for romantic heroes in literature from this point onward. And so as he writes, then, Goethe not only is creating the foundation for the romantic hero, but he is also creating the foundation for the romantic movement in Germany. Additionally, though, it's not that he writes from this place of not understanding the deep and intense emotions that characters like Werther feel, because he himself is living and inspired by this life of the romantic hero. Similar to the protagonist in his novel, Goethe himself was prepared or groomed by his father to study law, but he realizes very early on that this is not something that he wants. He would much rather study the arts. And when I say the arts, I don't just mean what you would do in art class. I mean literature, music, drama, all of it. And this is where he finds his passion. So although he goes to university to pursue a degree in law, he soon rejects these classes and very rebellious, right? He begins to study the arts instead. And although he graduates, he never loses touch with this emotional connection to the arts. Right? And something interesting we need to point out before we move on then is that early on in his life, Goethe also gets this connection with the supernatural. So he, as a young man, has this long-term illness that he eventually recovers from. But after he recovers from this long and treacherous disease, he becomes interested in the occult. And when I say the occult, meaning things that are associated with magic, and particularly having this dark connotation to it. We're going to see this becomes very important in why he chooses to write certain things that he does in Faust, which itself also deals with things of the supernatural and the occult. So after he graduates and he has this first novel published, The Sorrows of Young Werther, he achieves great success. And guys, when I say great, I mean extraordinarily so. Because remember, he publishes that novel in 1774, and then just a year later, his writing has gotten him so famous that he catches the eye of one Duke Charles Augustus. And this Duke Charles Augustus is a very important figure in German politics. And he invites Goethe to attend the court at Weimar. So just to help you out there, when we're talking about words and phrases in German, whenever you see a W, we pronounce it as a V. Okay, so he goes to live at this court. And although for a time he abandons literature, this is ultimately going to be a huge turning point in his life, because in this time when he is away from literature, he becomes a minister of state. He becomes very involved in politics and really getting this up-close personal view of certain political pitfalls or shortcomings in society. And he is going to be able to take a trip to Italy during this time, so in 1786. And during his 2-year trip there, he remarks that he found himself again as an artist, unsurprisingly, right? Because remember, Italy is home, or is the birthplace to a number of artistic powerhouses, for example, like Dante, right? So Italy is the excellent place to go to in terms of trying to revive these romantic movement feelings, right? Getting in touch with nature, embracing not only human dignity, but also this complexity of human emotion. And additionally, during his time at the Weimar court, Goethe becomes friends with another German poet and playwright called Frederick von Schiller. And you'll see both of these men pictured in the statue on the right. And this is actually a monument to both of these men, who not only were great friends, but were great figures in the Romantic movement in Germany. And so his friendship with Schiller helps to ensure that we have texts like Faust in front of us. Because without the help of this man, without their friendship, arguably, right, many of Goethe's works would have gone unfinished. Turning then to one of his most famous works, the Writing of Faust, we see that the writing of Faust for Goethe takes a long time. And part of this, right, is due to his time away at that Weimar court, but again, due to the help of his friend and poet, Schiller, we see that he's eventually able to finish the writing of Faust. And I want to make something very, very clear. When we're reading Faust, it's not an idea that is solely born from the imagination of Goethe. It's based on this legend of Faust that Goethe would have grown up hearing himself, because it begins as early on as the 1400s and the 1500s. And he, as a little boy, would have seen this play being performed as a puppet show, right? And he becomes fascinated with this story. And this story is based on a real-life historical figure named Johann Georg Faust, hence where we get the name Faust. And Faust, as an historical figure, was someone who was known as an alchemist and an astrologer and someone who dabbled in the occult. And it was said that his magic tricks were so beyond this world that in order to perform them, he must have sold his soul to the devil. So he becomes rejected by the church in Germany, and people start whispering about his deals with the devil. Hence where we get this idea in literature, one that Goethe writes about in his version of Faust, but one that we also see not only in literature, but also in film and in music, this idea of being so obsessed with achieving something that you will sell anything to get it, even your very own soul. So Goethe takes this idea that he was introduced to as a child and he runs with it. And he begins writing in the 1770s. And again, like we said, Goethe has this problem of writing and beginning but not being able to finish. But with the help of his friend Schiller, eventually he is able to finish both these parts, because Faust as a drama is very large. We're only going to be looking, in fact, at 2 scenes in particular from this story. And so this is going to be one of Goethe's greatest works, but also the last work that he will ever finish, as he completes it and it's published after his death and received very well by the public, so much so that we continue to see plays from Goethe's version being performed today. That'll be it for today's video. In tomorrow's video, we're going to look more at building background in terms of the play Faust. So looking more at the legend that Goethe uses to build his entire narrative, but then also looking at how can we classify this text? Is it really just a drama, or can we put it with the likes of the Iliad and the likes of the Inferno, right? These epic poems. And then finally, we're going to dive into beginning to read Faust, and we're going to find ourselves looking at what occurs right before Faust makes his treacherous deal with the devil. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.